Tim Longhurst, thanks for coming in and talking to us here at The World. I'm very keen to hear what you've got to say as a futurist about 2012. But first, can I put our discussion into a bit of context and ask you what you thought were the key trends of the year gone by in 2011?
Well, I suppose the trends that stand out to any one of your viewers, for example, would be based on where they are in the world and what's occupying them. For me, I've noticed businesses starting to take social media seriously. And what I mean by that is they're starting to ask the question, if so many people are using social media, what are the implications for our business, for our products and services? How do we need to adapt to this new landscape? There's an example.
Yeah, and really 2011 was a year that sort of defined the role of social media. We saw the year beginning with the Arab Spring, where people were using SMSs, texts, mobile phones to such a large degree to mobilise themselves, to communicate in order to mobilise themselves collectively.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's gone from a criticism of Twitter was that it was sometimes really trivial conversations happening, what people are eating for breakfast, and I think 2011 put an end to that. And when Time magazine named the protester the Person of the Year, what they were focusing on was the fact that passionate people mobilising for a cause using everyday technology became a theme of the year.
Okay, did 2011 bring any surprises for you?
Yeah, it did. One thing that came out was in the UK, the Centre for Alternative Technology has a program called Sustainable Britain 2030, and that's a 20-year plan for Britain to become completely zero emissions. And here in Australia, a team at Melbourne University said Australia could be 100% renewable energy powered within 10 years, and that's called Zero Carbon Australia 2020. And so we've had the conversation about climate change become so problem focused, and it is the touchstone issue of our generation. And yet what we're starting to see is people starting to look at the technologies that can deliver a renewable energy future. And it's interesting to see that using today's technology, it would be possible to be 100% renewable energy powered even in a country like Australia.
Okay, now, well, let's shift forward now.
Sure.
The future is where you're more comfortable as a futurist, but of course you're not a psychic. I mean, I guess, for example, you can't tell us how many gold medals Australia will win at the London Olympics next year, or who's going to win the US presidential race, but perhaps you can talk about how Australians might learn about those developments, how they'll discuss them with each other, basically how those sort of world events will filter into our everyday lives.
Well, this is the thing. Part of the role of a futurist is to ask two questions. The first is, what's going on out there? And the second is, what are the possibilities? And so looking ahead, I'm a professional speaker, and the conference themes that are really coming up for 2012, the barriers are collapsing, the power of small, and the wisdom is in the group. And I can talk to any of those if you're interested.
Okay, well, let's go through them one at a time.
Yeah, sure.
The barriers are collapsing.
The barriers are collapsing. Well, so if you can remember back to when the Berlin Wall collapsed, the world's cameras were all focused on that moment. But what we've seen over the last 2 decades is that as cultural, technological and corporate barriers are starting to collapse, the cameras don't even show up anymore. And if you think back, let's take a website that was built by everyone 10 years ago, Wikipedia. That was the exclusive domain of the geeks. Whereas today, a website built by everyone, Facebook, is being used from everyone, from rock stars to grandmas. And so that is the barriers between me and you, me and other consumers who might have products to sell me, have all collapsed over the last few years. And so it's given rise to websites beyond eBay and into things like Etsy and, for example, Airbnb. Are you familiar with that website?
No, well, and this is my next question, because for me, I mean, I guess probably 2012 was the year that I decided I couldn't ignore Facebook any longer. 2011's been the year where I've decided I can't ignore Twitter any longer. So
sure. What
shouldn't I be ignoring in 2012?
Don't ignore the potential of people that you have never met to enhance the quality of your experiences in 2012. I'll give you an example. In New York tonight, more people will be staying in the bedrooms or apartments of strangers through a website called Airbnb than in New York's largest hotel. So this is, Rachel Botsman calls it collaborative consumption. The idea is that there's a whole bunch of web services that allow us to basically share the excess resources that we've got in our own lives with complete strangers. And it's being adopted around the world. Okay,
and this is what we're seeing with technology, its ability to actually unlock untapped potential in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you are travelling, what could be more interesting than staying with a local who's been recommended and endorsed, so they've acquired the backing of other visitors through an eBay-like reference system. And so what could be better than staying with a local, enjoying some local food, and perhaps windows that open, unlike many of our five-star hotels.
Okay, now I'm trying to remember this correctly. A moment ago you mentioned two other notions, the power of small?
The power of small. So we've started to see websites, and this is another web service story, such as Kickstarter.com. And one of my favourite Kickstarter stories, this is a website where any of your viewers who have $1 million idea could go to this website, pitch their idea, and get the backing of complete strangers. A great case study would be a Chicago industrial designer had an idea for a watch band that held an iPod Nano, the little square full-colour iPods, and it turns an iPod Nano into a watch. He thought he could raise $15,000 to kickstart his idea. Instead, he raised over $940,000.
Okay, so all this technology is obviously great for somebody with a fantastic idea, something simple and elegant like that, of course. But the other side of this is that we are tending to lose control of our ideas. So we don't actually own the idea when we write it down, because we don't own that piece of paper when it exists in the digital world.
Well, it's interesting. A colleague of mine, Ben Rennie, who has an innovation business, he said to me, we were having a conversation earlier in the year, and he was talking about the value of ideas, and we both agreed that ideas aren't where the value is, it's in the execution. Having a great idea, you can share that with the world instantaneously, but it's the gumption, it's the 99% perspiration that makes an idea really powerful.
Okay, and I guess as we're finding out with the internet, just as there's thousands of Tim Longhursts out there and Nick Grimms out there, there's also millions of people who are all having a great idea at the same time. As you say, it's about the execution.
Yeah, that's right. And that brings us across to the third trend, which is this idea of the wisdom being in the group. And what we're starting to see is organisations recognising that the hierarchy isn't going to work the way it used to for them, and that positional leaders in businesses are starting to say, how can I benefit from the wisdom of my group, the customers, the staff that I have available to me? How can I bring them in conversations around strategy? And so my work as a futurist, often in the past, a big part of my responsibility was to work in boardroom strategic conversations with boards or senior management, whereas increasingly I'm being invited in to large amphitheatres where entire staff are brought together to talk about the future.
Okay, well, but this reminds me of another point that I wanted to press you on, because, I mean, to what extent are we seeing this technology being co-opted by commercial interests who want to find out what we're thinking, what we're eating and consuming?
Yep.
Look, it's a little bit like my home telephone. I don't answer it anymore because every time I do, it's a telemarketer. Is it going to be the same with Twitter and technologies like that?
Well, I can't speak for your home telephone, but I can say that, yeah, you're right. The way that we're using the web is leaving digital fingerprints all over the place, and that commercial interests and non-commercial interests are using this information to make predictive models about future behaviour and to assess the way that we're behaving in aggregate now. And there's payoffs and there's challenges along with this trend.
Okay, very interesting. Tim Longhurst, thanks for coming in and talking to the world.
Nice to meet you, Nick.